There are really not enough words in the English dictionary that can explain my hatred for making these videos. But it's for the views, I guess. Let's just get this goddamn shit over with. Before we begin the actual review, let's go over some brief history of the SMK. The SMK began its miserable life shortly prior to World War II in the hopes of having a tank that could withstand a 45mm tank gun at point blank, and could survive against a 75mm howitzer from just over a kilometer out. It was first drawn up in 1937, and after several modifications to the design such as limiting the amount of turrets and the introduction of a torsion bar suspension, only one SMK was produced in 1939 and saw limited action in the finished war, and was struck by a mine early on in the conflict and was abandoned for 2 months till it could be recovered. Project was cancelled in favor of the KV-1. For those wondering what SMK stands for, it stands for Sergei Mironovich Kirov, a Russian communist official assassinated in 1934. And in War Thunder it performs exactly how you'd think. Pretty bad. But does this mean it's not worth it? Well, not exactly. Allow me to explain my statement. While the SMK might be about as fat as your mom and represent a bigger target than V2 rocket sites, that doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of fun in it. The SMK sits at a precarious BR of 3.7 in rank 2, which I find to be a little odd, and we will get into that now. The SMK also costs 1,300 G, which is a decent price for what it is. The SMK, while on the surface seems intimidating, is actually kind of not. All you really need to do is shoot the exposed at all times middle turret neck, as it will almost always result in a one-shot, as the thickness of the armor except the front and rear is 60mm. And just about anything can and will penetrate your armor, especially in the godforsaken 4.7 up tiers. Whereas you can hardly penetrate much at 4.7 frontally thanks to your stupid fucking L11 main gun, and your 20K 45mm pop gun.
Hi, how are you?
However, at 3.7 and below you can penetrate almost everything head on, just not the Shurins, as their UFP can resist your shots, whereas you cannot withstand their 75mm Big Mac M61 shells. Speaking of shells, we have quite a lot to cover, so sit down and grab some snacks. On the almost useless L11 gun we have 4 types of vodka bottles. Up first is the BR350A with the MD5 fuse that has decent penetration but a lot of post-pen, and you will one-shot a lot of opponents. The HE is most definitely HE and is most definitely garbage. The shrapnel shell is, well, HE that thinks it's special. Then we have the BR350 SP, that has pretty good pen, and decent post-pen. Next up is the 45mm 20K gun, which I quite like. First up is the BR240, which has okay penetration and pretty good post-pen for the size that it is. Then we have the BR240P, which is an APCR shell with over 100mm of pen, which is useful, but I'd recommend the next shell over it while carrying some 240P rounds isn't a bad idea, however. The BR240 SP is an AP shell that pens slightly more than a 240 AP HEBC, and can be useful in some situations where the APCR could likely bounce. The HE is basically useless. Elevation on the 45mm is -7 degrees to +25 degrees, and on the 76mm is -7 to 35 degrees, which is quite decent, but you won't be surprising anybody from hills because your main turret stands out more than when Mike Pence had a fly on his head. Reloading rates of the guns are 3.1 seconds on the 45 with a base crew and 8.1 seconds for the 76 with base crew. And the 45 can reload in 2.9 seconds with an ace crew, and the 76 can in 6.3 with ace qualification. I suggest taking 25 of the branched 350A shells, and 5 of the branched 350 SP shells, and for the 45 take 60 of the branched 240, 15 of the branched 240 SP, and 5 of the branched 240 Ps. Last weapon system is a 50 caliber DK machine gun that faces rearwards for some reason, and can be used by setting a keybind for it, but it's almost useless, so I wouldn't bother with it. The SMK weighs an astonishing 55 tons, and has an engine that cranks out 850 horses of power and has a horses thing to weight ratio of 15. And can make this fat Russian animal go at a rather slow pace of 35 km an hour forwards. And like the Zoot 37, your fastest speed backwards is forwards at 4.4 km an hour. And since Russians can't understand the concept of anything other than how to make vodka and forced labor camps, you don't have neutral steer, which is unfortunate. So going to critical locations on maps at the start of a game isn't going to happen. Your armor isn't that good as I said before, as you only have 75mm frontally on the hull, and 60mm basically everywhere else. Angling in this fat fuck isn't even worth trying because your turret neck is a massive target and is a big shell magnet, and all the ammo is stored center mass, so a penetrating hit will almost always blow you right the fuck up. But you do have a small Soviet village inside of the tank, comprising of 7 of the Soviet Union's finest tankers, so survivability can be quite good if being shot by brain-dead morons. Your main playstyle in down tiers is to be right out there in the front lines tickling enemies and dying for the Union, and in up tiers is to spawn another vehicle. Crew skills can go to tank driving, agility and vitality, reload, repair and leadership. And your modifications are obviously already unlocked for you. Overall, the SMK is a decent tank if you are looking for a fun time, but it isn't very consistent with its BR, as up tiers to 4.3 and 4.7 are really common. I'd personally put it to 3.3 because even there it would probably still get bent over, but 3.7 isn't too bad of a place either. And besides, the SMK has a good lineup there to back it up, such as 2 T-34s, a KV-1, and if you have it, the BT-7F-32. The SMK is more of a collector's vehicle, if you will, much like the Zoot-37. I would say buy it if you want some laughs, or for collection purposes. If you want a grinder, get the T-34 57 1943 or the Sherman. I hope you enjoyed.